Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Life is uncertain. It's okay to feel stressed, anxious, worried, or frustrated. It's normal. With CalHope's free and secure mental health resources, it's easy to get the help you and your loved ones need when you need it the most. Call our warm line at 833-317-4673 or live chat at calhope.org today.
Hi, it's Patrick O'Driscoll here. You might know me as Pods. I'd like to welcome you to the Adelaide Hills Farmcast. It's the podcast we produce for the love of farming right throughout the Adelaide Hills region. And now, I'll hand over to Adelaide Hills Farm Services' very own Belle Baker. Over to you, Belle.
Well, here we are, a very special episode of the Adelaide Hills Farmcast and the Adelaide Show podcast. No matter which audience you've come from, welcome, because I'm Steve Davis and I'm here with the hosts of the Adelaide Hills Farmcast, Belle and Pods from Adelaide Hills Farm Services. Welcome to your own podcast.
I know, it's pretty cool, isn't it?
Greetings to you, Steve, and thank you very much.
Now, for people new to the Farmcast, it's the major part each month is an almanac in which you look at some key tasks and responsibilities that people who are landowners or small acreage farmers can or should attend to over the following 4 to 6 weeks. We're still doing that this time, but you've wrapped it slightly differently, which I like, which is going to be the 5 things property owners and small acreage farmers should think about over the summer break. So we'll get into that in 2 seconds. Before we do, though, let's get the lay of the land. You're somewhere different today. Where have you moved to?
That's right, Steve. So we have just moved down to Currency Creek, about 15 kilometres from Goolwa, 20 minutes from Stratharvin. And this is the new home of our business and our family. We've bought a small property down here. So what it means is that we can start to help small acreage farmers down in the Fleurieu area as well. So we've really expanded our reach, which we're really excited about.
I've got to ask, Pods, though, have you got new toys to play with or what are you doing on this farm?
No new toys.
New toys yet.
Plenty of thoughts, plenty of research. However, it's been a whirlwind 4 weeks.
Yep.
Throw Christmas in, throw end of school year in, throw birthdays in, and we will look at what we are actually going to do with the 80 acres more seriously come the very, very start of the year.
Which is interesting because one of the services you offer is sitting down with property owners to do a bit of planning of that sort of thing and strategizing. So you'll be taking a dose of your own medicine, which is...
That's right, we will be. And we're not rushing it. So what we're really trying to do is get the lay of the land, understand what's in place here already and what the potential is, what we can actually do and achieve. And it's about being smart and making it work for us in our business, which we are very much continuing, and then here on the small farm frontage. So
great.
Yeah.
All right. Everyone can strap in and keep an eagle eye on you two as you go through the next 12 months or so. But right now, let's get ready for what is typically the Almanac segment of the Farmcast. I do feel like a fish out of water at this point in the recording. So, Belle, I will hand over to you because you normally run us through the Almanac. So tell us about, before we get into these 5 things, what prompted these 5 things that property owners and small acreage farmers should think about over the summer break?
The main thing here is it's that planning thing and knowing that things are different in the summer. It's hot. As farm owners or land owners, we have a responsibility, a stewardship to the land, if you like. And there are really important things that we need to consider. And so instead of going through it in terms of the Almanac, in terms of different enterprises on properties, what we're looking at it is more overall and how we can really be focused on making sure there is nothing goes wrong on our properties in the summer months.
All right. Well, let's walk through them all. I'll just give a heads up. We're going to be looking at water. We're going to be looking at bushfire risk. We're going to be looking at summer weed spraying. We're going to look at things to do around the home garden and the house paddock, and also things to bear in mind if you, as a property owner, are disappearing over the Christmas summer break. So water. It's the source of life. Give it the focus that we need as far as landowners are concerned.
One of the number one things you really must be doing is checking your stock water at least every second day over the summer months. It is one of those number one risk factors when we look at animal health, and it is one of those infrastructure pieces that can break down at any point. No matter how good you think your system is, there will be things that will break and go wrong, even if it's just an animal knocking over the top of a water trough. That can happen at any time. So we suggest that you must check your troughs or dam for water every second day, but in hot periods, every day. And I mean physically going out there and having a look and making sure there is water there. Now, there are some obvious signs that you've got water problems that you can see from a little bit of a distance. Pods, what we talked about this earlier.
Couple of likely symptoms, if you like, of water problems. Number one, if a pressure pump is consistently running, that means that there's a leak in your system somewhere, or maybe a float has been knocked off and hence the water is running into the trough and overflowing. Number two is stock consistently aggregating around that water point, which means that they are looking for water, says, I think there's a problem, we need to go and further investigate.
Yeah, so that really shows the stock are under stress. And I have seen it once in my lifetime where stock are in so much stress that they're actually pacing and running around the fence lines.
Which can't be good anyway, because that will build more need for water as they get thirsty.
Right. That is that real stress panic situation. So from a distance, you can see that, but there is nothing ever replaces actually walking up and checking to see that there's nothing going wrong.
On that the way you've stressed that a couple of times makes me think there's something bad that could happen if you don't walk up and take a look. What is there some story that you're recalling that's prompting that in particular?
Look, there's not really, but it's just that stock can dwell, if you like, at a water point on a hot day anyway. So if from a distance, so you actually don't know what's going on until you visually see it. There are some cues or symptoms, if you like, that you can see from a distance, but you don't really truly know. So, if they've just fed, if you've got, for example, sheep on a feeder or cattle on a feeder and they've had a big guts full, then they're probably going to be thirsty and we'll all go to the trough at the same time. But you don't know really what's going on until you physically walk up there and do that.
Sorry, Steve, it's a little bit morbid. However, I have seen with my experience in sheep that lambs are very playful. They will get in the trough on hot days. They will play. And I have had to pull sheep and lambs out of troughs because they've been pushed in, they've died in the trough. And as morbid and as disgusting as that sounds, that is a problem that only the farmer can fix by disposing of that animal.
Yeah. So one of the things we always say is with troughs, make sure you've got a cover over the ball top.
Yep.
So that helps prevent any animals moving it. If animals go in a hurry or they're knocked or whatever, with their heads they can knock the ball cock. And if that's covered, then you are doing absolutely everything you can to make sure that it's all going to remain in place. Now, the other thing with that is, we always say clean out your troughs. We used to clean our troughs out weekly. Now, if you've got cattle or sheep in a confined feeding area, we would suggest that has to be cleaned out daily. Now, Pods has a different view on this.
Go on, Pods.
I guess we were slightly smaller in our operation, less stock. So I agree with Belle that in a production feeding system, feedlot, containment areas, certainly without fail, clean the troughs out daily. Mild conditions, 2 to 3 to 4 days would be fine, but certainly when it gets hot, the need for water is much greater. I would be checking and most likely cleaning troughs daily.
Well, in fact, I remember late last year, I worked, or last year being 2022, at the time of recording, we made a video, I helped you make a video about cleaning out a water trough. Are we talking about giving things a good scrub? Because stuff can build up.
Oh, yes, it's pretty gross. So I think it was with Kate Phillips and I, we cleaned out a water trough and we had trouble getting the bung out. But there's always a means and a way. There's really no excuse for not being able to do it. If you can't get the bung out of your water trough, then you may need to tip or just bucket the water out and scrub it down. There are trough brushes available at your local rural resellers. They are ideal because they're actually often shaped in the way you need it.
Right.
Look, it is something that we are big on. It's to do with the hygiene of your property, looking after your stock, and there are no excuses. It's something that must be done. And if you have a property, you have stock, you need to be cleaning out your water troughs really regularly.
And should you keep some copper sulphate around the place?
Yes, so we recommend you do put copper sulphate in. Pods is probably better to talk to that.
Copper sulphate is a great agent, using my Year 12 chemistry here, to prevent the algae from building up within your trough. The algae won't build up when you're cleaning daily or every second to third day, but certainly in those cooler periods, copper sulphate tablets in the water will help keep the water clean.
Yeah.
And that's fine for the animals?
Absolutely fine. No risk at all.
Yeah.
Can I just add from recent experience, please check your rainwater tank levels.
Oh, why would that be, Patrick?
Because our rainwater tank level is at 0% now. So
on our new place.
On your new property.
We have an imminent problem, but that's something we're going to work our way through. But even though it has been a wet year, we've had a almost non-existent spring and a very long winter. Please, just check your rainwater tank levels, because we don't know if there is a leak in the tank or a leak in the system somewhere.
I'm glad that's popped up, because this is the time of year when Pods might just recline and watch too much cricket. So now he's got something to keep him occupied.
Absolutely. We wouldn't want that, would we? In our property at Littlehampton, we had what was called a rain aid, and that made sure our rainwater tank never went below a level. And when it did, it would be filling up with mains water. Now, we don't have that here because no mains water. But that little system, which cost a couple of $100, meant that we never, ever ran out of rainwater, and that if a fire ever went through our property up there, we always had water in the tank.
All right.
So that little gadget was wonderful.
All right. Well, look, that's a lot to cover as far as water is concerned. When we come back later for an interview, I want to talk about a lot of water that's coming down the River Murray at the moment, but we might just pause that for the time being, because number two, I guess it's almost the opposite of water, and that's fire, bushfire risk. What are some things that property owners will have been, he says optimistically, or still need to do, he adds pessimistically, over summer, or preferably before summer?
Yeah, so we've talked extensively about this over the months on the Farmcast, because we're really about that prevention, doing things to reduce your bushfire risk, or you're doing it early so that you don't have to be doing it late. There's actually not a lot of fun in clearing land and doing that hard work out there when it's already really hot. One of the things that we say is spray your fence lines, particularly your boundary fence lines, and slash your fence lines. Now, the other option is to create a fire break with your harrows. Now, Pods and I have talked animatedly about this. The old school theory was to use your harrows and create, for example, about a 10-metre boundary.
Sorry, what is a harrow for those of us who live in the city? I know the name, but I've never applied it in the farming realm. What's a harrow?
Okay. I would correct Belle by saying a lot of people used to just cultivate their country, turn it over, whether that be with a cultivator, a disc, maybe a set of harrows. Harrows is a tillage implement.
Right.
So it's just turning the country over. However, I'm very much against that.
Why?
The only time I would allow tillage is when fire is imminent to prevent a fire break, to create a fire break. Why am I against tillage as a preventative measure? I believe it leaves that country that you till or turn over exposed to both wind erosion and possible water erosion.
Right.
Yeah.
Would it be fair to say maybe there's a nuance here? It might be better in some situations than others. You've mentioned imminent fire, but maybe some land it's a better option, or are we close to a blanket rule?
So that's probably a fair call, Steve, particularly if you've got large amounts of scrub national park very nearby.
Yep.
And it is very heavy loam soil type. I would be comfortable with that.
I think sometimes it's worth thinking about, have I done everything I can to reduce the fire risk on my property for me and for my neighbours? And if that to you means doing a 20-metre fire break, go ahead and do it. If you believe you're in a lower risk area and you know you everyone's doing the right thing, then maybe that is simply slashing a 10-metre 2 go overs with your slasher. Yeah. And then that for you might be enough. Yeah.
And that's us doing something. Can we enlist animals to help us on this front?
Yeah.
Absolutely, Steve. You can bring stock into a contained area or in and around your house, yards, particular areas, and just get them to graze heavily for a period of time within reason. So not to bear the country off, and that would pose a threat with wind erosion and water erosion, but to reduce the biomass that's in those areas.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. Good call. Great call.
And look, I know that both of you like your gadgets, as do I. I'm not throwing the first stone. There's been a lot of talk about these farm firefighting units. Are you advocates of this?
Absolutely. So there has been a government grant in place. It's now closed, and there's been a huge uptake of people taking advantage of that grant to improve their on-farm firefighting ability. We think it's a must, but if you're in an area where maybe you've got 3 to 5 acre properties and you're all lined up, maybe between a few of you, get one together. You know, put one. And the CFS are now absolutely advocating that we put them onto a vehicle and not have them on a trailer. Now, in some areas that may be not reasonable, but if you talk to your neighbours and maybe get a trailer, get a fire unit, put it on there, everyone knows and understands how to use it. That's a really, really good addition to the CFS service if you've got a fire in your area. But ideally, landowners should have a vehicle with the fire unit on it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, we had really hoped. We reached out to the CFS and asked if they can come and speak to us on the Farmcast about these farm fire units. But unfortunately, with the impending floods happening, they are just busy. And of course, in general terms, as far as bushfire, they're also busy.
Yeah.
And we understand that. So it'll be probably be towards the end of the summer when we speak to them. But as soon as we are able to do that, we're going to get some really solid information straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be an investment that's a one-time use.
No. And, look, fire happens at any time, doesn't it? So,
yeah. Steve, having been the victim of fire, where we had a fire start on our place, and that was a harvest fire, I think the other thing that our listeners need to understand is the insurance agent, the insurance assessor post fire will visit you on property and they will ask each and every single question. And the more convincing you are with the preparation that you've put in place and the greater amount of care that you've done, the more likelihood that you will receive an insurance payout.
When the mercury finally does rise, we've had a rather cold year in 2022, and a lot more of us will be putting attention on what's happening out there. You're big fans of some various apps that we should use for monitoring. Tell us about them.
Yes, so we both have 2 apps on our phones. We've got lots of apps, but including the weather app. But we have one called Alert SA, and that beeps our phones. We don't ever turn that alert off. It's probably one of the only, that and a CFS app, 2 apps that we don't turn the alerts off, so that at any point in time we know if there's a fire happening in our area or any kind of emergency in actual fact. And what that does is you set an area around your home or wherever you want it to do. You can have it as big or as small as you like. And so anytime something happens in that field, we get an alert. That is the best, most efficient way. And we've also got it for some other properties that we manage. We have fire alerts in their areas as well, because we want to know. And even if it's not a major emergency, but something is happening, then we can ring that landowner and say, hey, we're about to come on property. We think there's something nearby. We're going to come and check the waters, make sure you've got your sprinklers on, et cetera, et cetera. We can't advocate for that enough. That to us is 101. Yeah.
Now, one last thing before we move on from fires, I've got to ask you, I've never owned a ute. I had a panel van. That's another story for another podcast. However, with utes, a lot of hot cars in the country, the boys and girls, they do them up. They probably run hot underneath as well. So is there a problem if you're hooning around on your paddock with a hot engine during fire season?
Yes, there is if it's a petrol engine.
Okay.
Because the more modern petrol engines carry a catalytic converter on the exhaust system, and these can heat up, or these do heat up greatly with the presence of stubble, paddock growth. This can lead to a higher possibility of starting a fire. So all farm vehicles should be diesel driven. And that includes ideally your side-by-side vehicles, like
your motorbikes.
The motorbikes can't
four-wheel motorbikes.
Yeah, like the side-by-side gators, those type of things. Ideally, purchase a diesel engine, and your fire risk from that would be much, much, much reduced.
So we would never drive anything that's not diesel driven around a paddock. According to the CFS website, at least 25 fires are created every year by vehicles and machinery on properties.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's 25 too many. Easily avoided. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and again, as responsible landowners, you've got to do everything you can to reduce the risk.
And I note on your website, AdelaideHillsFarmServices.com.au, where there's a Farmcast section. The January Farmcast will have links to some of this information and material. Right. Let's move on to number 3, which is weed spraying, summer weed spraying, because I know there's a lot of harvesting of crops that happens hopefully around this time. Take us through this. What do you mean?
Okay, this is from my broadacre cropping background, Steve, and post-harvest with summer rain, I think it's a great tool to any weeds that do germinate during the summer from summer rain occurrences. It's good to keep the paddock brown, i.e. spray the paddock out, and it reduces seed set in future years, but more to the point, you are conserving soil moisture for your forthcoming seeding plan in April, May, June. So it's a great tool to undertake summer weed spraying. The other summer weed spraying, not so much from a broadacre point of view, but continue monitoring your blackberries, box thorns, gorse, and this is the ideal time of the year to really try and reduce your plant numbers.
I actually think I heard you say in either the October or November edition of the Farmcast, blackberries, which is beautiful fruit, but they run rampant. They're a weed throughout South Australia. There are more than a one-hit wonder. You've got to keep on them over time to really stay on top of that. So I guess that's why you use the heat of summer as your friend to get on top.
Well, that's when the plants are most active, so chemical will be most uptaken from the November through to April period.
Okay.
And you're exactly right. It's just not a one-stop shop or a one-hit wonder. You've got to keep at it to reduce your blackberry population.
I saw paddy melons on the list as well.
Yeah, paddy melons are an issue if you are going to sow that paddock in the coming year. For tined implements, they'll just wrap right around and block your tined implement up. I think as they stand alone, the stock won't generally eat the paddy melons, but if you give them a spray, you can use what we call the spray graze technique. That sweetens the paddy melons up. So 10 days after spraying, you can move stock in there and they will absolutely swallow the paddy melons right up, both the plants and hopefully not the actual seed or melon, because we hope that the plant hasn't got to that stage where it's set its seed.
Yeah. However, I might see if I can borrow some of that to spray on broccoli at home for the girls.
Right.
And also, is this a good time of year to do soil testing? Because is there a better time or worse, or is it just fitting in amid the busyness?
I think it's an absolutely outstanding time to do soil testing in January, February. That comes with the planning stage of the year. What do you wish to do with a particular paddock, a particular farm? What do we wish to achieve? So soil testing sets a basis that we know what we're dealing with our plant, with our nutrition levels, our pH, and other toxicities or deficiencies that may or may not be present.
Love it. All right. If we were recording this about 50 years ago for the Australian Women's Weekly, this is when I would take on a patronising tone, and I'd turn to Belle and say, Belle, what do you do around the home garden and the house paddock at this time of year?
Oh, goodness. And I guess because we're recording this, I'm not allowed to respond as one would.
Exactly.
Yes,
I wouldn't dare say that face to face. I can tell you that much.
No. Look, that's fine. I think we all understand that Pods' idea of gardening is to get a chainsaw. I think that's been a well-established fact. So most really good 50s housewives would already have mulched their garden beds and mulched around their fruit trees, but without getting, without touching the, you're loving this, aren't you, Steve? Without touching the trunks of the fruit trees to prevent rot. So I would recommend you give everything a really, really good soak. Stand there with your hose, soak your trees, soak your garden beds, especially if you're going away for a couple of days, but really get that water down to the roots where it's going to be most useful, not just keep it up around the surface. And one of my little tricks that I do is I make sure I look at where the water's going to run off to. If you're on a sort of a sloped area, you might find that your very helpful watering is just sliding down and not being used where you need it at the roots of those fruit trees or any other things you've got in the garden. So I create little jam banks, so that I can hold the water where I want it to be. So instead of just doing sprinklers or drippers, I actually do stand there with the hose and put significant amounts of water on, because these plants, they need it this time of year. Stand there, have your cricket in your ears. I could even send plugs out there maybe.
Yeah. And then just water be damned. Make that shape. That's great. Yeah. I like that. And also, is it really important just to keep the water off the trunk of those plants? I remember growing up being told, don't water the leaves. You're actually saying there's something to that.
Oh, there is. Well, because of evaporation. So there's really, and also if it's too hot, you're going to burn those leaves. Yep. So you want to keep water right at the base of your plants, try and avoid watering the leaves, but also not to put mulch too close to the trunk of any fruit trees because it will create rot. So you want to just keep it a little bit away because it can, warm up and water and, rot. That's not a good look too.
We talked about slashing out on the properties, weeds and everything. Is there any cause for clearing and hacking and that sort of stuff around the home?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And to be honest, within 10 metres of your dwelling, you do not need to ring native vegetation people. You can actually clear native vegetation within 10 metres of your dwelling. and we absolutely recommend that you do that.
Yeah.
Look, to be honest, Steve, it should have been done by now, because if you did it before fire season, you could have burnt the debris or turned it into a mulch, or which you can still do, obviously. But yes, clear everything around your dwellings. It also means that if you've got any friendly snakes, that was spot the oxymoron, they're going to have less hidey holes places, but also it means that if anything burns nearby, it's not going to go straight up into your dwelling.
Yep.
Yes, and for that reason, we actually haven't done it here yet, but we will be. But in Littlehampton, we had a roof sprinkler system.
Yep.
But Pods, what does that consist of?
We had a local plumber install that at Blackiston, Steve. There was 3 sprinklers put in a line along the top of the roof. That was the water was supplied by a 22,500 litre rainwater tank that came off the shed, and that was driven by a petrol pump.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily for us, in our time at Blackiston, we didn't need to use it with any imminent fires. However, I'd check it semi-regularly, and it was as easy as pie to check and maintain. Everything just worked beautifully. And again, it's about trying to limit your liability and limit your risk.
And as a beautiful aside, if you're a filmmaker, you could have rainy day locations any time of year.
Well, that's right. But look, Steve, I'll just make an important point on that. It's all very well that Pods goes and checks that system. But let's face it, sure as eggs, if a fire went through, guess who's not going to be home? Guess who's going to be out working somewhere else? It's going to be me and George. So we've taken upon ourselves, Pods teaches us and reteaches us all the time how to use that system, because it's good that he checks that it works and it's all filled up and all ready to go. But unless in that moment of panic, if I can't turn that system on, it's a waste of time.
No, that's good. I'm glad you mentioned that, because if we stuck to the Australian Women's Weekly 50 years ago, it would have just said, ask hubby.
Yes, it would have. Yeah.
Finally, one thing I remember from rainwater tanks growing up, mosquitoes. Are they still a thing?
Oh, look, very much so, and particularly with the floods coming down the River Murray now. You may have heard there's been some big calls out by SA Health that there is a very high risk of mosquito bites, which can lead to Japanese encephalitis. Now, Steve, I'm not sure if I've ever covered it with you, but my dad actually has encephalitis.
Yep.
He's very ill. And we believe that happened through mosquitoes on the farm, through our irrigation system there. So what we're doing, I mean, rainwater tanks should always be covered. That's a really good idea. So that's really not too much of a risk, but it's if you've got water pooling around your home. So dams are a problem. And we have a lagoon just outside here, about 10 metres from the house at its closest point. And we're about to install just a small fountain just to reticulate the water so that it doesn't sit still and add to that breeding of larvae on there. And that's just, it's going to be a cheapy fountain I get from a garden centre, anything to keep the water surface moving to make sure we reduce that risk of mosquitoes.
And I do know you've got a soft thing for those water fountains yourself. So if you've got an itch, you should scratch it.
Oh dear, yes, Steve. Yes,
All
that's a good thing.
Let's bring it home now with the fifth of our 5 points, and that is if you're a property owner or you're a leaseholder on a property or small acreage farmer, and you have built up leave, you need to get away for a bit. What should we be doing to keep the property safe while we're gone?
Okay, everybody deserves a holiday. We understand that. But if you own a property in the Adelaide Hills or the Fleurieu or anywhere, in fact, you've got a real responsibility to make sure you've done everything you can to reduce your fire risk. Number one thing, let your neighbours know that you're going away. If your neighbours are also going away, let the next neighbours know. So that as much for a fire risk system, but also from a theft point of view, this time of year, there is a massive increase in stock theft on properties. So to have somebody, even if you get somebody to come and house sit your property, or whether you put locks, just normal padlocks on your external fences, it's a really good idea. Keeping in mind, if anybody needs to access your property to fight a fire, they will just chop it off.
Yeah.
So shouldn't be too big, but something just to delay anybody thinking about doing anything wrong.
Is that really a thing? I picture
Absolutely.
the stealing of theft of stock, etc., as a John Wayne movie or a McLeod's Daughters storyline when they were running out of
Based
ideas.
on real life, aren't they? No, it is a real
Wow.
thing.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes. So somebody regularly visiting your property to check those waters, because, of course, even if you're not there, somebody has to be checking your stock. It's we really, really recommend that you use some technology to check your water. So to have remote water sensors, which is a great idea. You do need Bluetooth for it. You can set it up to your phone and get your neighbour to check it if you're not there, but have something in place in your absence is a very, very good idea.
Can I just be cheeky? You do that for people, don't you? People can actually book you to keep an eye on their properties, yes?
Yes, that's right. So, a lot of people just get their neighbours or dial a friend or whatever else. But if you actually want somebody skilled and professional to check your property and to be able to fix any minor leaks in your water system, or check that, acidosis, or when you get a grass seed in skin.
Checking the general health of your stock.
Yeah, somebody has to do that. And if you have got a problem with your stock, what is your friendly neighbour going to be able to do about it? Now, we can obviously help in those situations because we've carry everything on our vehicles to be able to look after your stock. But I think sometimes, we can come and help, for a week or two, whenever you're going away. We do that short-term farm management stuff as well as the long-term. And as long as you understand that I don't always know the terms of the things that we do.
Well, actually, just on that, because you mentioned right at the beginning of this list about checking water every day, how the heck do you keep an eye on all your animals to make sure they haven't got grain or whatever it is stuck in their skin causing irritations?
When you're checking the stock daily or every second day, you will notice any irritations. I do ones when they flip their heads, and dogs are the same. We haven't actually talked about dogs and grass seeds.
Yep.
But we've just had to have our dog madly clipped to get rid of a heap of grass seeds all over her. And if it's left, it can cause some real issues. They can even travel into stomachs and things and cause severe ear infections. Abscesses and that kind of thing. You want to be finding that pretty early.
There is an almanac with a difference of the 5 things that property owners and small acreage farmers should be paying attention to over the summer break. Let's pause briefly because you've encouraged me to just go out and stand quietly with my hose for a bit in the garden, and then we'll come back and we'll have a bit of a chat because there's actually some really evergreen topics I'd like to touch base with you on. Well, now to the interview proper with Bell and Pods from Adelaide Hills Farm Services. We've had the Almanac, and now two things. For the Farmcast audience, there's some interesting things I'd like to raise that you will feel connected to, but also for Adelaide Show podcast listeners who are more city-based, I want to just peep over the horizon and get a glimpse into what it's like being on the land, especially during the Christmas, summer, New Year period, where a lot of us just kick off our thongs and life's easy. We don't have the responsibility of acres and acres of land and animals, relying on us. So, Bell and Pods, I want to start this interview proper with that most famous extract from Dorothea McKellar's poem, My Country. I love a sunburnt country, a land of sweeping plains, of ragged mountain ranges, of droughts and flooding rains. Now, we're talking about floods in a moment, but I want to ask you about the sunburnt bit. The sunburnt land. What goes through your minds as people who have both grown up on the land? Because I would have thought sunburnt is not a comfortable thing to see when you're looking out at the land. It's kind of what it is, but you'd rather it wasn't sunburnt. Am I right? Am I wrong? Can you talk to that for me?
You're right, Steve. It's probably not comfortable, but that's the natural colour and the appearance of the country at this time of year, albeit this is somewhat abnormal with the really long winter and spring that we've had, and the growing season has been longer, and some areas are still drained, but generally speaking, with most areas, cereal harvest is well underway. That's leaving behind brown paddocks of stubble. Pasture country is starting to turn due to a lack of moisture, and that's just what it is at this time of year. But all a natural part of the ecosystem.
See, if it was me, I'd reflect on that. I think that I'd have a gnawing sense of dread. It's like nature reminding us that but for the grace of a few rains each year, this is it.
Yes, but I think also, I mean, it is part of the natural system.
Yep.
And when everything is dry on top, you're preserving water in the soil, which is why there's been such a push away from tillage and to our no tillage systems, so that we're actually preserving what's in the ground. And as long as there is some biomass happening, then you're actually doing a really good job of protecting everything. It's when it's bare earth and you've got a hot northerly flowing and you've got dust storms happening, that is a scary, horrible time. And that to me is what that sunburnt country is. And I just have more of that horrible red earth running away vision when it comes to a sunburnt country, as opposed to what we have, which is dormant and maintaining the moisture in the soil.
That's great nuance, because that's why we're having this chat, because we drive past at 100 k's an hour or thereabouts, and we can't tell one from the other. And you're seeing the nuance, and everything has a time in each season, and that bit where it gets baked, but as long as there's moisture and there are insects all happy, and it's all okay.
That's right. Yes.
I want to reflect a bit on this Christmas season, because I opened up reflecting on that. I've got family in around the Karoonda area, some cropping underway, some sheep, things like that. And we often have to push Christmas back or bring Christmas forward because it's time to harvest. Thinking of both of your upbringings, each one after the other, what was the rhythm and flow around Christmas time when nature says, I don't care what the calendar says, you're doing this, sunshine?
Okay, so for me, down in the southeast at Lucendale, Christmas always happened on Christmas Day. It doesn't mean that usually you check waters or do something in the morning. Mm-hmm. So you start early in the morning, get everything done, and then you do have the rest of the day doing whatever Christmas is for you. And for us, it was you will love this, Steve, back to the 50s Women's Weekly. We always had the 3-course hot meal, roast turkey with all the trimmings, with the silverware, the fine china and silverware, the beautiful champagne glasses, and the children at the other end of the table to be seen and not heard. Absolutely traditional. Guess what I never do with my life anymore. Mm-hmm. But that was Christmas for us. Now, we generally didn't go on holidays until a couple of weeks after the New Year, where our family would go down to Robe for 2 to 3 weeks. But Dad would always be back on the farm every second day, and or our workmen would be there to check on everything. So he would drive back every second day, maybe every third day if it was a wet season. There was.
That's interesting.
It never got away. Yeah.
That anchoring to the land, you are at that point the steward of the land, and it just says to me, the artifice of this thing called annual holidays that we've superimposed thanks to capitalism and the way our society is created. It is a bit fake. If you're the person involved in food production and textile raw material creation, it doesn't just stop because it's having 2 weeks off.
Well, that's exactly right. And I guess some families have workmen that will you go away, but there is always somebody there watching and managing what's going on. And the other thing I recall quite distinctly is if it's a hot 40, 50 degree day and we all want to just go to Long Beach and just hang out, all the men, and let's face it was all the men back then, or the women would take the children to the beach and the men would go back to their properties on those 50 degree hot northerly days, because somebody has to be there, because that is a very high risk environment or situation.
Yep.
somebody has to be there to man the CFS trucks and to be on site.
Wow, of course, you were in the blessed part of the country where there's fairly reliable rainfall, etc.
Yes, although we were absolutely devastated by the Ash Wednesday fires. So
there is that, but
yeah.
that aside, the fairly cushy part of the world compared to, I'm glad I'm not near you so you don't hit me,
Yes.
where pods grew up, because to me that was in much more of the traditional, far-reaching, huge distance to the horizon sort of farming country. What was it like for you, Pods? What are your memories of growing up in that sort of environment?
My memories were we would quite often travel to Adelaide on Christmas Day to go and see my grandparents. And like Belle, it was very much like Grandma was a wonderful, wonderful lady, and we would have quite the spread for Christmas lunch, 3-course meal, turkey, the ham, she'd been cooking for hours. And
Days, darling.
Days, in preparation. And it was a lovely spread. And, Grandma was of that woman's weekly ilk, as we keep referring to. And
yes.
It was magnificent. But leading up to Christmas, it was always a bit of a race to see whether we would have harvest finished by Christmas. Dad always said if harvest wasn't finished by Christmas, that means we'd have had a good year. So it was a bonus if we were still harvesting after Christmas.
Oh.
A lesser year, we would have harvest out the way before Christmas. But nevertheless, we were always reasonably busy up until about Christmas Eve. When we had lambs in feedlots, yes, we'd have to, as Belle alluded to, just go and check lambs in feedlots first thing Christmas morning, check the waters, feed up, and then the rest of the day off. When we didn't have lambs in feedlot, you had the full day off. But it was always tricky. The other frustrating thing I found was a lot of my non-farming friends and town folk were quite often having work Christmas parties and the like, which is still the same today leading up to Christmas, but with the advent of headers going, harvest having to be dealt with, there was no such thing for us, and we would push on. But that was just the life we chose.
Yeah, I like how you used the word advent there. That was very good, Pods. I just want to reflect on the River Murray at the moment, and I'm sure in your travels you bump into people who are along the River Murray system. They have an anxious time at the moment. Some have been overrun by water, some are dreading that it might happen, others are dealing with contingencies if it's blocking transport routes. I know irrigators up in the Riverland were saying the high flood could mean the power's cut out, which means they can't run their irrigation systems. And so the irony, there's all that water, but they can't get it to where it's needed. Can you reflect on this a bit for us? I mean, because you look at it differently. You come with your lens from the farming perspective. How are you reading this situation?
It's every bit as devastating as a bushfire incident. The major difference here is that these people who are directly affected or indirectly affected along the river have had a significant amount of time to prepare, but also worry. And I think with a bushfire, it happens pretty quickly. It's over, and then you start the cleanup and sorting it out. With this, I just feel for these people who are feeling this pressure day in, day out, and what impact that would be having on them in their families, but also on, having to come up with these contingencies, knowing that at any moment their power will go out, they probably won't get any notice, and then all their irrigation will stop. We've had stories from people with vineyards who it's a slightly different situation. They're worried about their access as much as anything when the time comes and whether things are going to ripen in time. But also people with crops along the river pods, if they lose their crop or they're unable to harvest that crop, they're actually going to be out of feed for 18 months because that is the seasonal thing. They can't get back on to sow it. So this water won't be going away in time for them to do any spraying or any preparation of the soil to be able to put crop in for next year. So this effect is so, and it gives me goosebumps. I think sometimes it's not today's problem. It's going to be going on for 18 months, 2 years. And these people, I mean, you're talking about them having to have a significant amount of money to be able to buy in feed fodder for their stock, or it's not insured, Steve. So we had a haystack go up in fire one Christmas Eve, and we had several haystacks on the property, and we always insured half of them because it just makes sense to reduce the risk, whatever else. So we lost a massive haystack full of hay and had it insured, but that didn't actually help us feed any stock.
No.
You lose that, and I think that worries me a lot for them, is that ongoing, and they're losing the infrastructure too.
And Pods, on that, with this time delay, is that because there could still be water pooling on the surface, but even then it might be too sodden to do whatever, to get to the state where you can then re-sow, etc.? Is that what we're talking about there?
That's exactly right, Steve. But what I've found most surprising is listening in particular to the ABC, who were in Mannum on Thursday morning, I believe, and Lee Radford was there, that these people could be suffering the high water levels for the next 2 to 3 to 4 months. Now, that's even before the water starts receding, and then you can start taking some remedial action. So as devastating as a bushfire is, that it can be here today and gone tomorrow, it's quick, and action can start reasonably soon. Flooding in this instance can be quite the opposite. And I'm still trying to process that timeline of having such high water levels for such a long period of time. And then it is going to take time for it to recede. It's just not going to go back to its normal level, whatever normal is, within that matter of a day, 2 days, 3 days.
And picking up on Bill, you started to mention infrastructure as well. To me, it puts it, so you're seeing it beautifully from a farming perspective, and appreciate that, because there's some nuances I'd missed. I look at it also, having done some programs touching on Ukraine earlier this year, where Russia, thanks to the great idiot who's leading them, the vicious human, is bombarding infrastructure across a country. At least here, it's some small saving grace that it's not humans, it is nature, but it just deepens the awareness that when infrastructure's upset, that takes a long time to restore.
Certainly, because even just in terms of fencing, the water is going to be damaging and pulling fences out and doing all sorts of damage. But you can't actually repair or fix fences until the ground is dry enough. So it's not even a matter of getting tractors on, like getting our tractor on with the post hole knocker or anything like that. It's that the soil is so wet underneath that it won't hold. So there is another timeline that just goes out because it needs to be dry enough. And
then the other thing is, just briefly on this one, you've moved to, I think you said Currency Creek is the region that you're in now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I know Langhorne Creek is renowned for every few years, probably some gaps bigger than others, having natural flooding that comes through, and it has been that over centuries that's created the beautiful soil signature that you've got there. Is Currency Creek included in that sort of realm?
Well, you just put us on the spot there.
It's my gift. It's a gift.
Thank you. Look, certainly there are areas along the actual Currency Creek that are much more fertile because there is an increase in flow. At certain times of year, and certainly some years more than others. We are alongside the Currency Creek here, and certainly there has been a lot of water go through, but it doesn't hold. So what we are left with is silt, and it is good. It's certainly fertile. We are conscious of the erosion factors that water, when it passes through, doesn't stay.
Yeah.
So we have already started talking. The creek along through our property is fenced.
Yep.
And we are going to look at maintaining the natural grasses and planting some more trees along there, because we see that as our responsibility, but also, our stock will benefit from the shade the trees provide, and it will keeps the soil profile in hold.
Yeah, hadn't thought of the erosion factor too. Water, can't live with it, can't live without it.
No.
Just finally, a reflection for us city folk, some of whom will be hopping in a car and spending some summertime out in country areas, which no doubt means farming areas as well. What sort of mindset should we keep to acknowledge that there are still working farms on there, and they just, I don't know, I've never really thought about it from that perspective. What's it feel like seeing us all come and overrun? I mean, some more than others. Robe is an epicentre, Victor Harbour's an epicentre, but what goes through your mind, farming families, etc., when all of us have this exodus from the city to you?
From my point of view, I think it's fabulous. The more people who want to come out and enjoy the regions, the better. It's the number one way they can get an appreciation of what we do. We appreciate what people do. You know, the fact that people live in cities and want to travel to country, rural areas or seaside areas, I think is wonderful. They get to see the changing of the seasons. They get, they'll see people on properties, either in harvesters or just moving stock, etc., on their properties. And I encourage it, and I love seeing it. I really do. It slows us down on our local roads.
Yeah.
Because you have people travelling that aren't necessarily familiar. Some of them can tend to be impatient. And so that would be you, would it, Steve?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. So I think it's just an acknowledgement that there are more people around, but if we can make it a good time for everybody, then I fully embrace it. But that's my opinion. And it's more money coming into the regions.
Yeah. Pods, what do you think?
I would agree totally with that. I haven't thought about it at any great length. Yes, at times you see people travelling by and they're on their holidays and you are somewhat envious of their position, but we get our time off too, so swings and roundabouts.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that will bring to a close the Farmcast aspect of our recording. We've got one more segment we're going to sneak into the Adelaide show, but Pods will be on in a sec with his lovely say goodbye message that he has, that Tim, our editor, slips in at the end. I can assure you the February edition will be back to the normal format, and who knows, we might have even snared some CFS people for that one as well.
He's hoping.
Pods and Belle, thank you so much for being part of your own podcast, the Adelaide Hills Farmcast, but also part of the Adelaide show.
Oh, thank you for having us, Steve. It's wonderful.
Absolutely, and thank you for your time and effort, Steve. Well done. Thanks for listening to the Adelaide Hills Farmcast. Belle and I hope you found it helpful. You can leave comments and send questions on the show notes page for this episode, which is on our website, adelaidehillsfarmservices.com.au. Just click on Farmcast and look for the December episode.
Life is uncertain. It's okay to feel stressed, anxious, worried, or frustrated. It's normal. With CalHope's free and secure mental health resources, it's easy to get the help you and your loved ones need when you need it the most. Call our warm line at 833-317-4673 or live chat at calhope.org today.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.